Project Blue Book, the U.S. Air Force's secret UFO investigations. The secret files of Project Blue Book. In the years after World War II, strange lights began to appear in the skies. Glowing disks, silent triangles, metallic shapes that defied logic, spotted by pilots, soldiers, and civilians across the United States. At first, the government dismissed them as weather, meteors, or imagination. But soon, the reports became impossible to ignore. Between 1947 and 1969, the U.S. Air Force ran one of the most secret and controversial programs in its history, Project Blue Book. Its mission, to investigate more than 12,000 UFO sightings, and to decide whether the skies above America were being visited, or invaded. Behind the curtain of national security, scientists, generals, and intelligence officers gathered evidence, photographs, and testimony. Officially, they were searching for natural explanations. Unofficially, they were preparing for something they didn't understand, a phenomenon that seemed to move faster than any aircraft on Earth. For decades, the project's existence was denied, its findings classified, its witnesses silenced. When the files were finally released, they revealed a story stranger than anyone expected, a mix of science, secrecy, and fear. A tale where truth and cover-up blurred into one. This is the real story of Project Blue Book, the investigation that tried to explain the unexplainable, and ended up uncovering how little we truly know about our own skies. Welcome to Secrets of Armies. Chapter 1: The UFO Panic of 1947. The story began in the summer of 1947. The Second World War was over, but the Cold War was just beginning, a time of spies, secrets, and skies filled with new machines. Radar technology had transformed human vision, the heavens were no longer unreachable. And yet, what Americans began to see in those skies was something that no radar could explain. On June 24, 1947, a civilian pilot named Kenneth Arnold was flying near Mount Rainier, Washington, when he spotted 9 bright objects moving at impossible speeds across the horizon. He described them as shaped like discs, skipping through the air like saucers on water. The press seized on his words, and within days, the term flying saucer entered the public imagination. Then came the flood. Hundreds of reports poured in from across the country. Strange lights over Oregon, metallic craft over Texas, glowing orbs seen by air traffic controllers, military pilots, even police officers. Some described silent discs hovering for minutes before vanishing at lightning speed. Others swore they saw structured craft, larger than airplanes, flying in formation. The US military could not ignore it. At first, the concern wasn't aliens, it was the Soviets. In 1947, the Cold War paranoia was already spreading fast. Could these objects be new secret weapons? High-altitude spy planes? Experimental missiles? America's technological dominance was being challenged, and its skies, once symbols of freedom, now looked vulnerable. The Air Force launched its first formal inquiry. Project Sign, established in 1948 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. Its mission was simple: collect, catalog, and analyze UFO reports to determine if they posed a threat to national security. Behind closed doors, officers studied hundreds of sightings. They interviewed pilots, examined radar returns, and compared flight patterns to known aircraft. Some of what they found could be explained. Weather balloons, light reflections, atmospheric phenomena, these explained many reports. But not all. A small percentage of cases, about 20%, showed objects performing maneuvers far beyond known technology, right-angled turns at supersonic speeds, sudden vertical climbs, no visible propulsion. To the investigators, it was deeply unsettling. In late 1948, Project Sign's analysts prepared a classified document called the Estimate of the Situation. In it, they concluded that some UFOs appeared to be real, physical objects of unknown origin, possibly extraterrestrial. The report was sent to Air Force headquarters in Washington. General Hoyt Vandenberg, then Air Force Chief of Staff, reviewed it and rejected it. He ordered the report destroyed. The official stance of the Air Force would be that no evidence of extraterrestrial craft existed. But the sightings didn't stop. Instead, they multiplied. From 1948 to 1950, reports came from all over the world: military bases, radar stations, even bomber crews flying over Korea. Pilots described glowing objects pacing their aircraft, sometimes merging into one, sometimes breaking apart. Radar operators confirmed the contacts. For the first time, UFOs were not just a mystery, they were a potential threat. The Air Force responded by reorganizing its investigation. Project Sign became Project Grudge, an effort less about discovery and more about control. Its new directive was to debunk sightings, to calm public fear and keep the press from spiraling into hysteria. Files were reclassified, witnesses discredited, and the term UFO, unidentified flying object, replaced flying saucer, giving the phenomenon a colder, more bureaucratic name. But the public's fascination couldn't be contained. What the government tried to bury, the people made myth. And behind every denial, suspicion grew stronger, that something was happening in the skies, and that someone was hiding it. The UFO panic of 1947 had ignited something that couldn't be extinguished. Out of that fire, Project Blue Book was about to be born, an investigation that would last 22 years, and haunt history forever. Chapter 2 Project Blue Book begins by 1952, the number of UFO reports had grown beyond control. Radar operators, airline pilots, and even military personnel were filing detailed accounts of objects performing maneuvers that defied every known law of flight. The old investigation units, Project Sign and Project Grudge, had collapsed under public pressure and internal skepticism. The US Air Force needed a new approach. A more organized, scientific face. That year, the Pentagon authorized the creation of Project Blue Book, headquartered once again at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. Its mission was officially to determine whether UFOs posed a threat to national security and to analyze all credible reports of unidentified aerial phenomena. Behind that careful language was something else: the need to control the narrative. The man chosen to lead the project was Captain Edward J. Ruppelt, a young and methodical officer who had served as an intelligence analyst during World War II. Unlike his predecessors, Ruppelt believed in transparency and structure. He introduced standardized reporting forms, established strict investigation protocols, and coined the term that would replace flying saucer forever: UFO, unidentified flying object. Under Ruppelt's leadership, Project Blue Book tried to treat the mystery scientifically. Reports were divided into categories: identified, unidentified, and insufficient data. Investigators interviewed pilots, radar technicians, and civilians. They collected photographs, radar records, and witness sketches. Each case was filed, catalogued, and analyzed, a massive paper archive that would eventually grow to over 12,000 investigations. But even in its early days, Blue Book's scientists found themselves trapped between two forces: truth and politics. When a sighting involved radar confirmation or military witnesses, the pressure from above was immediate. Officials demanded quick explanations: weather balloons, temperature inversions, aircraft reflections, anything that could close the file and calm the public. But for some cases, there was no clear answer. In the summer of 1952, one of the most extraordinary UFO incidents in history unfolded over the nation's capital. For 2 consecutive weekends, radar operators at Washington National Airport and Andrews Air Force Base tracked multiple unknown objects flying directly over Washington D.C. Pilots were scrambled to intercept, but each time they approached, the lights vanished, only to reappear miles away seconds later. The incident caused national panic. Newspapers screamed headlines: "Flying saucers over Washington." The Pentagon held emergency meetings. It was the moment the UFO mystery became a matter of public obsession. Inside Project Blue Book, Ruppelt and his team analyzed every radar trace, every eyewitness report. They ruled out temperature inversions and atmospheric illusions. Still, the radar data didn't lie. The objects had been real, physical, and airborne. But when their findings reached Air Force headquarters, the message was clear: downplay it. The public was to be reassured, not alarmed. A press conference was held, led by Major General John Samford, the Air Force's Director of Intelligence. He declared that the sightings posed no threat, that unusual weather conditions were the most likely cause. The truth, whatever it was buried under calm words and confident smiles. Behind the scenes, Ruppelt's frustration grew. He wanted Blue Book to be objective, but the project was being weaponized for public relations. He watched as serious investigations were quietly dismissed, their files sealed under national security. By 1953, he was ordered to cooperate with a secret scientific panel, one that would decide the future of UFO research in America. Its name was the Robertson Panel, and its conclusions would change everything. From that moment on, Project Blue Book's mission would no longer be to search for answers, but to explain them away. Chapter 3: The Robertson Panel and the Policy of Denial. By 1953, the U.S. Air Force was overwhelmed. Public fascination with UFOs had reached a fever pitch, fueled by newspaper headlines, Hollywood films, and radar incidents that defied explanation. Every report, no matter how small, seemed to feed the belief that something extraordinary was happening in the skies. The Pentagon's problem was no longer the phenomenon itself. It was public perception. That winter, the Central Intelligence Agency quietly intervened. The Cold War was at its height, and Washington feared that mass UFO hysteria could be exploited by the Soviets. If thousands of citizens flooded switchboards with UFO sightings during an actual air raid, the real enemy aircraft might go unnoticed. America's obsession, they argued, had become a national security risk in itself. To address the issue, the CIA convened a panel of top scientists, physicists, and intelligence experts. Led by physicist Howard P. Robertson of the California Institute of Technology, the group became known as the Robertson Panel. Their mission: to review the evidence collected by Project Blue Book and determine whether UFOs posed any legitimate threat. For 4 days in January 1953, the panel examined photographs, radar data, and eyewitness reports, including the infamous Washington D.C. sightings of the previous summer. Captain Edward Ruppelt and members of Blue Book presented their most compelling cases, hoping for genuine scientific inquiry. But the tone of the meetings was clear from the beginning. The goal was not to solve the mystery. It was to neutralize it. After less than a week of review, the panel issued its secret conclusion: there was no evidence that UFOs represented advanced technology or extraterrestrial craft. Instead, they recommended that the Air Force should debunk UFO reports as quickly and publicly as possible. The aim was to reduce public interest, discourage amateur investigators, and reassert confidence in government authority. The recommendations went even further. The panel urged the military to use psychological warfare techniques to educate the public, through the media, films, and trusted scientists, so that UFOs would be associated with misidentification, hoaxes, or overactive imagination. If the mystery couldn't be erased, it would be managed. Project Blue Book was quietly restructured. Its funding was cut, and its staff reduced. Captain Ruppelt, frustrated by the change in purpose, resigned soon after. In his absence, Blue Book became little more than a clearinghouse for public complaints, a bureaucracy designed to dismiss, not investigate. By the mid-1950s, new leadership turned skepticism into policy. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, the project's scientific consultant, was ordered to provide immediate explanations for each sighting, no matter how implausible. When several farmers in Wisconsin reported glowing discs landing in their fields, Blue Book blamed ball lightning. When airline pilots described objects outmaneuvering their jets at supersonic speed, the explanation was temperature inversion. Even radar confirmations, hard data that should have warranted serious study, were labeled as equipment malfunction. it was the birth of what historians now call the policy of denial. Behind closed doors, the Air Force continued to collect data, but to the public, the message was simple: there's nothing to see. There's nothing to fear. But not everyone inside the system agreed. Dr. Hynek, initially a skeptic, began to notice inconsistencies. He saw reports discarded without analysis, witnesses mocked, and unexplained cases buried under routine paperwork. By the late 1950s, he quietly began to change his mind. As the public's curiosity dimmed, the Air Force believed the problem had been contained. But above the clouds, sightings continued. Military pilots, radar stations, and even astronauts would report encounters that Blue Book could no longer explain away. The government had silenced the conversation, but not the phenomenon. And soon, the silence itself would become part of the mystery. Chapter 4: The cases they couldn't explain. Even under the policy of denial, Project Blue Book couldn't ignore one simple fact: some cases refused to fit any explanation. Behind the curtain of bureaucracy, a few Air Force officers and scientists quietly admitted what they couldn't say in public: something was in the sky that defied every known law of flight. One of the most disturbing incidents occurred in July 1952, just days before the Washington D.C. sightings. At Haneda Air Base in Japan, radar operators tracked an object performing impossible maneuvers near restricted airspace. It moved erratically, accelerating and decelerating without visible propulsion. 2 F-94 fighter jets were dispatched to intercept. The pilots reported a bright, bluish-white light that darted away at blinding speed, climbing vertically until it vanished. The radar trace confirmed the acceleration, far beyond the capability of any known aircraft. Then came Lakenheath Bentwaters, 1956. Over England, US and Royal Air Force radar operators tracked multiple targets moving at supersonic speeds. At least one RAF pilot confirmed visual contact with a luminous object that reacted intelligently to his maneuvers, closing in, matching his turns, then accelerating vertically at incredible velocity. Both US and British intelligence reviewed the data. Their conclusion: unidentified, and beyond current technological capability. Cases like these quietly piled up inside Blue Book's archives, stamped, unidentified, filed away, and forgotten. Publicly, they were never mentioned. Privately, they were terrifying. In 1964, one of the most famous encounters of all took place near Socorro, New Mexico. Police officer Lonnie Zamora witnessed a metallic craft land in the desert on a column of flame. When he approached, he saw two small humanoid figures beside it, then heard a loud roar as the craft lifted off, scorching the ground beneath. The Air Force investigated exhaustively. Zamora was deemed a credible witness. Physical evidence was found: burn marks, impressions in the soil, and melted sand fused into glass. Blue Book listed the case as unexplained. Even Dr. J. Allen Hynek, the project's chief scientific consultant, admitted it was one of the best documented cases on record. The files also contained incidents from military aircrews, not just civilians. In 1957, a B-47 bomber flying over the Gulf of Mexico was followed by a bright object tracked simultaneously on ground radar and onboard instruments. The object maintained precise distance, changed altitude rapidly, and vanished only when the crew attempted to pursue. When Blue Book analyzed the data, they classified it as radar anomaly. The aircrew disagreed. Then, in 1966, a wave of sightings swept across Michigan, prompting national headlines. Hundreds of witnesses, including police officers, reported glowing lights maneuvering silently over fields and forests. Hynek, sent to investigate, faced pressure from the Air Force to produce a quick explanation. Under duress, he suggested swamp gas, a theory he would later regret for the rest of his career. The press mocked the statement, and the public's trust in Blue Book collapsed overnight. By the late 1960s, Project Blue Book had become a paradox. Officially, it claimed that no UFO case posed any threat to national security and that no evidence suggested extraterrestrial origin. Yet inside its own files, there were hundreds of incidents involving radar contact, electromagnetic interference, physical traces, and multiple credible witnesses. The data spoke louder than the denials. Dr. Hynek, once the government's chief skeptic, had seen enough. He began to speak publicly about his growing belief that the UFO phenomenon deserved real scientific study, not ridicule. His transformation marked the beginning of the end for Blue Book. The Air Force wanted the controversy buried. Hynek wanted the truth known. In the final years of the project, a new generation of scientists, journalists, and politicians began asking questions the Air Force could no longer dismiss. The same secrecy that had protected Blue Book now threatened to expose it. The files were too large, the contradictions too obvious, the mystery too public. Something had to give. Chapter 5: The End of Project Blue Book. By the late 1960s, Project Blue Book had become a shadow of its original mission. What began as an honest investigation into aerial phenomena had turned into a bureaucratic machine designed to dismiss them. But public pressure, and the persistence of credible witnesses, made it impossible to simply ignore the phenomenon any longer. The Air Force needed an exit strategy. In 1966, following the Michigan swamp gas controversy, Congress demanded a serious scientific review of UFO reports. To satisfy public concern, the Air Force contracted the University of Colorado to conduct an independent study under physicist Dr. Edward Condon. The resulting effort would become known as the Condon Committee, a project that would determine, once and for all, whether UFOs deserved further study. Behind the scenes, many hoped this would finally legitimize the research. But the tone was clear from the beginning. Internal memos later revealed that Condon and his team had already decided their conclusion before analysis even began. One early document stated bluntly, "The trick will be to appear objective, while eliminating the UFO problem once and for all." Over the next 2 years, the Condon Committee examined hundreds of Blue Book's most puzzling cases: radar sightings, photographs, and pilot testimonies. Many of the researchers within the committee, including physicist David Saunders, found genuine anomalies they couldn't explain. But when they presented their findings, Condon dismissed them, focusing instead on trivial cases that could be easily debunked. When Saunders publicly protested, he was fired. In 1969, the committee published its final report. The conclusion was decisive, and devastating for anyone hoping for truth. Nothing has come from the study of UFOs that has added to scientific knowledge. Further extensive study of UFOs probably cannot be justified. It was exactly the statement the Air Force had been waiting for. Within months, the Pentagon announced that Project Blue Book would be terminated. On December 17, 1969, after 22 years, the doors of Blue Book officially closed. Its 12,618 case files were archived at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, then transferred to the National Archives, where they remain to this day. The final public statement from the U.S. Air Force declared 3 points: no UFO ever reported, investigated, or evaluated by the Air Force indicated a threat to national security. No evidence existed that sightings represented technological developments beyond human knowledge. There was no evidence that any UFOs were extraterrestrial. For the government, the matter was closed. But for those who had worked inside the project, the answers weren't so simple. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, no longer bound by military restraint, publicly denounced the Condon report. He revealed that Blue Book had dismissed hundreds of unexplained cases without proper investigation, and that many high-ranking officers had privately admitted to witnessing inexplicable phenomena themselves. Hynek went on to found the Center for UFO Studies, CUFOS, advocating for scientific inquiry into what he called the most persistent mystery of the modern age. In 1977, the Freedom of Information Act made thousands of Blue Book files available to the public. Journalists and researchers poured through the documents, uncovering patterns, inconsistencies, and evidence of quiet censorship. Many cases, like the 1956 Lakenheath Bentwaters radar incident or the Socorro landing, remained officially unidentified. The files revealed a government more interested in controlling public perception than discovering the truth. Project Blue Book was dead, but its ghost lingered in every unexplained light in the sky. And as technology advanced, the sightings didn't stop, they multiplied. Commercial pilots, astronauts, and even military personnel continued to report encounters they couldn't rationalize. Decades later, new programs like the UAP Task Force and RO would quietly reopen the investigation under new names. The name changed. The century changed. But the question did not. Whatever Project Blue Book had really found, it left behind something more powerful than evidence: doubt. And doubt, once released, can never be classified again. The files remain open for 22 years. Project Blue Book tried to explain the unexplainable. Thousands of witnesses, hundreds of investigations, and a mountain of classified files, all in the hope of finding certainty in the sky. But when it ended, the only thing proven was how much we still don't know. The Air Force said there was nothing to see. The scientists said there was nothing to find. And yet, the skies never went silent. Pilots still reported lights that outran their jets. Astronauts spoke of glowing objects moving against the stars. Radar screens still flickered with impossible shapes, there one moment, gone the next. The phenomenon didn't end when Project Blue Book closed its doors. It simply moved somewhere the public couldn't follow. Perhaps the truth was never buried in a file. Perhaps it was never meant to be understood. Because in the search for answers, humanity found something deeper, a mirror reflecting its own fears, its own limits, its own smallness beneath the vast unknown. The official story says the skies are empty. But the silence says otherwise. Thank you for watching. If you believe the truth deserves to be uncovered, not hidden, subscribe to Secrets of the Battlefield for more stories from the dark archives of history, where secrecy meets the impossible.